So thank you very much. And I'm gonna discuss about food reward and appetite control, which is very close to what Chris just mentioned. And the question I'm interested in here is to discuss how food reward and appetite control change during both diet, weight loss, and follow-up. So first, the question is, what is food reward? And food reward is an intervening variable that affects how much and what we eat, so food intake. It's also a psychobiological phenomenon ending in the brain that we can distinguish into two subcomponents. So liking, the pleasure we have from the food, and wanting, the desire, the motivational component from eating. Those components, liking and wanting, are both implicit or explicit version of food reward. And in this study, I'm measuring liking and wanting, so food reward components with the Lead Food Preference Questionnaire. And liking is measured with a visual scale, and implicit wanting is measured through the frequency-weighted algorithm. It's based on food pictures varying from taste, so sweet and savory, and fat, so high fat and low fat. So to conclude, I will be looking at 8 different types of food reward, liking and wanting, for 4 different categories of food. So I mentioned that I will be looking at food reward in the context of appetite control to give it some perspective. And by appetite control, I mean appetite ratings, energy intake, eating behavior traits, body composition. And we developed a study called Dietary Induced Variability in Appetite, so DIVA study, which is a randomized control trial analyzing the difference between analyzing intermittent energy restriction versus continuous energy restriction for women, so 30 women with overweight and obesity, until they lost 5% of their weight, so clinical weight loss. We measured appetite control and food reward at measures day 1, so before the diet allocation, and after they lost 5% of their weight, so measures day 2, and then at 1 year follow-up. And what is important to mention here is that the 1 year follow-up was without any contact. So it was no contact follow-up. So they didn't have any contact with us for 1 year. And on the bottom, you have the detail for the measures days. So now if I go into the results, so the main what you see on the screen is first that on the left you have liking, pre-lunch, and on the right you have wanting. The box plot shows on blue it's baseline, on yellow it's post weight loss, and on red is follow-up. And what you can clearly see is for liking, it's decreasing for each food category. So high fat sweet, low fat savory, high fat sweet, and low fat sweet. Whereas for wanting is not changing. That's the first result from the study, which replicated this result from my systematic review. So liking but not wanting decrease after weight loss. What we can add here with this study is during follow-up, there were no significant changes, neither in liking nor wanting, but there were also no difference between baseline and follow-up for liking. So they come back to baseline. Another point also is there is no difference between diets. So IER, fasting, intermittent fasting, didn't have a differential impact on food reward, contrary to your hypothesis. And lastly, if we see the different lines, so the individual lines, we can see there is an apparent individual variability, but as Greg has mentioned, we need to have a control to see whether this individual variability is due to the intervention or not. So we can't conclude on that here. So to conclude, to give some perspective, I have analyzed what happened for appetite control variables during both weight loss and follow-up. So on the list, you can see that the liking was decreasing and no change in wanting, but that was happening in the same time as decrease in appetite ratings, such as hunger, decrease in disinhibition, improvement in restraint, in craving control, and decrease in body composition. So during weight loss, there is an improvement in appetite control variables. And during follow-up, these improvements are not sustained. So the variables come back to baseline or increase, like body composition and disinhibition. So to conclude on this, improvements in food reward and appetite control during weight loss are not maintained during follow-up, which was not controlled. There were no effect of diet modalities, large individual variabilities for psychobehavioral changes, and no relationship between changes in food reward and changes in appetite control. So we need to further understand the mechanisms that could explain why liking is changing and not wanting, and how we could sustain these changes during follow-up to maybe prevent weight regain. That's all for me.